Презентуй, будь ласка, коротко в коментарі свою книгу «Обов'язок і суверенність». Будь ласка, глава «Інтелектуальна суверенність». Про що ти там розповідаєш?
Well, I mean, intellectual sovereignty as an idea is the kind of the ability to not be influenced by outside forces and coming up with your own ideas about your own geopolitical interests, your own cultural interests, where you want to take your nation, your ethnic group in your culture. And I think this is very important because without intellectual sovereignty, it's very easy to start working against your own interests, your own inherent interests in all forms, and then also as well, you know, gradually assimilate over time. So that's my general statement.
Дякую.
On that.
Наступна глава «Політична реальність». Будь ласка.
Yeah. I mean, this is essentially just talking about realism and how Rusins lack any type of geopolitical realism. You know, you see these Western activists, Western Rusin activists, they talk about how we're going to send a letter to DC and they're going to change something, where it never does, because the US has no interest in that. And so in the previous book, I talked more about why specifically about the West, about they need to realize the West's interest versus ours, but this chapter versus our visions is more about, as a whole, starting to recognize the whole realism angle, and that when it's between one nation and another, okay, there's no kind of moralistic sense here in many cases. So we need to better understand to have a realistic take on issues.
Наступна глава цієї книги «Фінансування суверенності».
I mean, this is one where, you know, funding sovereignty is essentially about you need to fund your own institutions and your own organizations. You can't have national governments whose best interest is to assimilate you, to fund your own organizations, because guess what? As soon as you step out of line, funding's over. And it's this thing of that so many of our institutions are not funded by Rusins, but by the national government. So guess what? If a Rusin organization is funded by the central government in Kiev, are they going to say anything Kiev doesn't like? Of course not, because then funding is going to go away. Same with Slovakia, same with Poland. And my point is not to say, oh, you know, this suddenly means, you know, we need to be hostile towards them. It's just the fact that we need to fund our own projects so that our intellectual sovereignty remains stable.
Дякую. Отдільна глава «Лемковина».
In short, we need to repopulate Lemkovina. With Lemkos, we need to, shall we say, just how the Zionist Jews moved to Israel, we need to enact a plan to, instead of having these Lemkos assimilate in Western Poland, Western and Northern Poland, we need to find a way to bring them back into the fold, bring them back into Lemkovina, and to have it become an actual region again. Right now, there's couple thousand Lemkos there, maybe 10,000, I don't know, something like that. But it's the fact, maybe it's a little more, but the fact is that it's not as an ethnographic region, it doesn't exist anymore. It exists in our heads, but it doesn't exist in reality. So we need to create what exists in our heads, we need to move it into reality.
Дякую. Дефініювання обов'язку.
This chapter, I mean, it's very philosophical. I mean, I can't really do it in like rapid fire, but philosophically speaking, it's the argument of what duty does one have to their own culture, to their own nation, and I find an extreme duty to the Rusin nation or ethnic group, however you wish to call it. And essentially, it's just my argument. It's a very long chapter. It's my argument of why each of us has a duty to continue that culture.
Дякую. Далі. Гордість за своє у суспільності.
So, pride in your society is it's essentially the importance of having pride in what came before you, and this is mostly meant for Westerners, but also to some people in the homeland, is that people see what came before you as though it's alien. It has no connection to you. There's nothing, that's what people did generations before me. Where I argue is that instead of looking at this concept as though everything is alien, look at it as though a chain. The people before you were just another link in the chain. You shall become one, and 3 generations after you, there will be another link. So this is another very long chapter, but it's talking about how things aren't as alien as you may seem, and you are protecting this chain and allowing it to go forward, and you are part of it. It is part of you. It's not something foreign that people did hundreds of years ago.
Дякую. Далі вестернізація рідного.
Well, this is something I think people from the Soviet Union would greatly understand, because of just how what the Soviet policies were. It's the process in the West and in many areas of Europe today. It's this breaking down of the family unit, of the community unit, and it's this kind of thing of where the social bonds of our inner family circle, of our inner community, have been starting to break, at least in the West. And so I argue that many people from former Soviet countries have already experienced that once before, or the grandparents had, and we can't allow that to happen again from a different type of way, less forceful, but still the end result's the same.
Дякую. Обов'язок взглядом отуманених.
Oh, yeah. This one, controversial, shall we say? I don't know about controversial, but essentially it's the duty to those that have been brainwashed into thinking that they are Ukrainians, or they're Slovaks, or whatever else, thinking they're Polish. So it's the duty that we have, that even though they may be frustrated at us, they may hate us even, that we have a duty to them as one of us to try to enlighten them of what their actual history is, of what their actual ethnic origin is. And that's just me explaining my position on that.
Дякую. Ну і кінцеві думки.
My final thoughts of this book is that, and I think this is a kind of important thing of where I wrote 3 books. It was called the Sovereignty Trilogy, shall we say. The first book was about our vision, is creating a vision. Second book, this book, which I kind of talked about in the end chapter, is about what our duty is to enact that vision. And then the third one, a critique of Western influence, was about what will continue to happen if we fail. So I think my final thoughts on what I'd written in various things is that we need to not recognize only the benefits, but also the responsibility that we have as Rusins that know our history, that know our people and what we've gone through. Knowledge comes with responsibility, and that legacy, we have responsibility for it. So those are only my really end thoughts about it.
Дякую тобі, Файно, за рекламу, за презентацію таку круту книжки твої. Я прочитав, маю надію, що прочитають і глядачі нашої теперішньої презентації, і будемо чекати твою наступну книгу.